The United States was angry about the loss of Cuba. Immensely angry. Slow Wi-Fi angry. The generals, bitter about Cuba turning to communism and the embarrassment at Bay of Pigs, had a solution. A dark and extreme solution. Terrorist attacks on our own people. This was Operation Northwoods, a now declassified plan given to President Kennedy by the Joint Chiefs Staff in 1962 as a way to take Castro out of power. The plan was to get domestic support for an invasion of Cuba. The US would commit assorted terrorist attacks on its own citizens, blame it on the Castro government, and rally an angry public to war. The US would then appeal to the international community, calling Cuba a threat to the Western Hemisphere and must be removed. Kennedy rejected this plan, and eventually Lyman L. Limnitz, the chairman who signed off on the plan, was removed from his position. He went on to become Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Operation Northwoods never went farther than that, and Cuba and America were spared from an all-out war. The generals lost against Kennedy in that round, and no attacks on Americans occurred. 2 years later, the Gulf of Tonkin incident happened, and the US began operations in Vietnam. But what if in an alternate timeline, Operation Northwoods was actually carried out, either unrealistically with Kennedy's approval, or more likely behind his back? Here is one of the many scenarios. The document didn't specify just one incident to be carried out, so we don't know 100% how the plan would have went, but we do have a wide range of ideas, so I'll just name the actual suggestions from the declassified Operation Northwoods document. There were plans to stage an attack on Guantanamo Bay, blow up a fake raft of Cuban refugees, actually attack Guantanamo Bay, blow up a real raft of Cuban refugees, hijack a civilian plane, gun down or bomb innocent Cuban Americans in major US cities, shoot down a passenger aircraft, specifically one with college students, Remember the Maine incident, and unspecified widespread Cuban communist terrorist campaigns across major American cities. After any of these attacks, the United States would immediately blame Castro, providing manufactured evidence. The talk of an invasion of Cuba gets full support by an enraged American public. Patriotic citizens rushed to join the military to get back at the Cubans. At the time this plan was suggested, March 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis didn't occur yet. In fact, it wouldn't be until the summer when the Russians began constructing missile sites on the island. To the generals, the Soviet Union wasn't much of a concern since Cuba wasn't a part of the Warsaw Pact. However, if the US did invade, it could result in either massive tension with the USSR or a blunder of nuclear war. It's difficult to say how relations would change if such a conflict erupted on Cuba. A conventional war, however, does claim the lives of thousands of American and innocent Cubans. According to the Pentagon, a US invasion of Cuba could result in at least 18,000 Americans dead and countless Cubans lost. In this timeline, Castro would be overthrown relatively quickly, either killed or goes into hiding, but that doesn't mean that the US's troubles would be gone. Some Cubans would actively take up arms against the Americans due to the history of American incursions on the island, so the US would find itself fighting a guerrilla war. It's difficult to predict how the new government of Cuba would be. This is just one scenario, as there can be countless different ways this alternate timeline would go. Like us on Facebook, subscribe if you have not done so. This is Cody from the Alternate History Hub.
It was the day the Earth stood still. A terror attack on the United States of such magnitude that it killed 3,000 people and injured another 6,000. On September the 11th, 2001, a militant Islamist group called Al-Qaeda coordinated 4 suicide attacks on the USA because of their objections to America's international policies. The land of opportunity was shaken and suddenly overcome with uncertainty. America had a new enemy to fight, and the US government made no hesitation in declaring this to the world. The American people had been told they were no longer safe in their own country. Radical extremists were out to get them, and the only viable response to this crime was military action. The war on terror had begun.